The winds howled across the dusty planet of Varelinine, carrying sharp grains of sand like tiny needles. The colony gates groaned against the storm, and most people stayed inside, hiding from the dangerous world outside. But not Area Cross. She stood at the edge of the colony's fence, her short brown hair tied back, and her worn boots pressed into the red soil. She was only 17, but she walked with the calmness of someone much older. A scanner hung at her side, blinking slowly, and a light pack was strapped to her back. Her breath fogged up for a second in the cold air before the wind took it away. Everyone warned her about the wild lands outside the colony. The creatures out there don't care if you're brave, they'd say. They'll eat you before you can blink. But Area didn't care about warnings. The world beyond the fences called to her. It felt more real than the metal walls and boring routines inside. She climbed through a hidden gap in the fence she had discovered weeks ago. No alarms, no patrols, no one noticed. The security bots were too slow for someone like her. As she stepped into the open wilderness, silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. The land stretched far and empty, filled with strange rock shapes and thick, silver grass that shimmered under the dark sky. Her boots crunched softly over the dirt as she moved forward. Then it came. A howl. It wasn't like anything she had ever heard before. It was deep and long, full of pain and power. It echoed across the land and sent a chill down her spine. That was the howl people feared, the one that meant death. The one that made hunters drop their weapons and run. But Area didn't run. Instead, she walked toward it. Step by step, she moved deeper into the wild zone, past broken scanner towers and old crash sites. The howl came again, closer this time. Her heart beat faster, but she stayed calm. She wasn't stupid. She knew this could be the end of her, but something inside told her this was important. After nearly an hour of careful walking, she found it. At the bottom of a shallow crater, surrounded by glowing green dust, lay a massive creature. At first, she thought it was dead. Its body was still. Its long white fur was stained with blood. Claw marks covered its side, and one leg looked broken. But then, one eye opened, a bright, icy blue eye that stared straight at her. Area froze. The creature looked like a wolf, but not from Earth. It was twice the size of a hover truck. Its limbs were long and strong, built for speed and hunting. Its face was beautiful in a wild, terrifying way. This was the albino wolf people talked about in whispers, the one that no one ever survived seeing. And yet, it didn't move. Area slowly raised her hands and took one step closer. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice shaking just a little. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf didn't growl. It didn't attack. It just watched her. Its breathing was slow and heavy, like each breath took effort. Area saw now how badly hurt it was. Its ribs were showing, and the blood on its fur looked half dry. It had been alone for days, maybe longer. Something, or someone, had done this to it. She knelt beside it, moving carefully, and opened her pack. Inside were some food bars and a small water bottle. She broke a piece of the food bar and placed it on the ground near its mouth. At first, the wolf didn't move. Then, slowly, it stretched its neck and sniffed the food. After a long pause, it opened its mouth and took the piece in its jaws. It chewed slowly. Area let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "You're not just some wild beast, are you?" she said softly. The wolf's eye blinked once. Then it lowered its head, resting it on the ground, as if to say, "I'm tired." Area reached out her hand. She knew this was a bad idea. She knew that one wrong move could mean losing that hand, or worse. But something in the wolf's gaze told her she was safe. Her fingers brushed its fur, soft and thick like snow. The wolf didn't flinch. In that moment, something strange passed between them. Not a sound, not a word, just a feeling, a silent agreement. Area didn't know it yet, But this moment would change everything. Not just for her, not just for the colony, but for the entire galaxy. She hadn't tamed a monster. She had made a bond. And that bond would soon be tested by forces beyond her imagination. The days after the encounter with the massive wolf were strange for Aria. She spent more time than usual in the wild, sneaking past the colony's fences and wandering into the wilderness where the creature had been. The other colonists didn't ask questions. They had always known her to be curious and independent, the kind of girl who didn't fear the wilds as much as the others did. But there was something different about the wilds now, something that felt alive, as if she was connected to it in a way she couldn't explain. Every day, she returned to the spot where the wolf had been, and every day, she found him there, resting in the same spot, watching her approach with those piercing, icy blue eyes. His injuries had begun to heal, but his body still bore the scars of his past, claw marks that were so deep they looked as though they could tear through the toughest of armors. His fur, once white as snow, now had patches of gray, where his wounds had drained and stained him. Aria had come to think of him as Ghost, a name that fit the wild, powerful, yet gentle creature that had seemed so close to death but was now growing stronger. Each time she visited, she would sit beside him, talking to him in soft whispers, hoping that somehow he understood her. And every time, he would turn his head slightly, as if to listen. But it wasn't just the creature's physical recovery that intrigued Aria. There was something else happening. The more time she spent with Ghost, the more she felt a strange pull toward him, a connection that went beyond simple care for a wounded animal. She had never felt anything like it before, not with any person or any creature. It was as if their lives had somehow intertwined in a way that couldn't be undone. One afternoon, a week after she had first found him, Aria sat beside Ghost as usual, her hand resting gently on his side. The wind was calm today, and the sky was filled with a mix of clouds and distant sunlight that gave the barren landscape an eerie, beautiful glow. "I think you're getting better," Aria murmured, glancing at the wolf's body, which now showed signs of growth and strength. "Maybe one day you'll be strong enough to run again, huh?" Ghost's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, she could have sworn she saw something in them, something deeper than just the cold, calculating gaze of a wild creature. It was almost as if he was thinking, understanding her words. But that couldn't be possible, could it? As she looked into his eyes, Aria felt a strange sensation wash over her. It was like a sudden jolt of electricity, a pulse that seemed to come from within the wolf himself. Her breath caught, and she instinctively pulled her hand back. Before she could think about it any further, the ground beneath her feet rumbled lightly, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Ghost's body stiffened beside her, and his ears twitched in alertness. A moment later, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps, far off in the distance. At first, they seemed faint, but as the seconds passed, the sound grew louder and louder. Aria's heart began to race. "Ghost?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. The wolf turned his head sharply, his eyes scanning the horizon, narrowing. He was no longer the wounded, passive creature he had been when she first found him. Now he was alert, focused. He stood up on all fours, his muscles rippling beneath his fur, ready for whatever was coming. Aria slowly stood as well, her eyes darting toward the sound of approaching footsteps. She could hear the crunch of rocks underfoot, the heavy weight of something, or someone, moving fast. Then, just as the last of the daylight began to fade, figures appeared on the ridge. At first, Aria thought they were just travelers, but as they drew closer, her blood ran cold. The creatures that emerged from the shadows were unlike anything she had seen before. They were tall, humanoid figures, wearing strange armor that gleamed in the dim light. Their faces were hidden behind metal helmets, and their movements were synchronized, like a military unit. The leader of the group stepped forward, and Aria's stomach sank. This was no ordinary group of explorers. These were warriors, and they were here for Ghost. The leader's eyes flicked over to Area. Then, with a sharp motion, he raised his hand, signaling for the group to stop. The leader's voice, though muffled by the helmet, carried across the space. "You found him, haven't you?" he said, his tone cold and calculating. "The albino wolf." Area's heart raced, and she instinctively took a step back, closer to Ghost, who was now growling low in his throat, his body coiled like a spring ready to unleash. "What do you want with him?" Area demanded, though she knew the answer. The creature in front of her wasn't just a wild animal. Ghost was a weapon, something created for a purpose she could only guess at. The leader didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, studying her for a long moment. "You shouldn't be here, human," he said, his voice soft but filled with menace. "This creature is dangerous, and so are you." Area's breath hitched, but she stood her ground. Her heart was pounding, but she refused to back down. "I won't let you take him," she said firmly. The leader didn't smile, but there was something in his eyes, a dark recognition, as if he knew she was more than just an innocent girl. He gave a short, sharp nod. "Then you'll regret this," he said coldly, signaling to his team. Ghost let out a fierce growl, his body tensing in a way Area had never seen before. The battle for his freedom was about to begin. The air was thick with tension as the leader of the armored warriors and his team stood before Area. Ghost, her albino wolf, growled louder, his hackles raised, every muscle taut with anticipation. The warriors were silent for a moment, watching, waiting for something. Area stood firm, her back straight as she looked directly at the leader. She had no intention of backing down. "You found him, haven't you?" the leader repeated, his voice cold and calculating. "The albino wolf is not a simple animal, girl. He is a weapon, one that should never have been let loose." Area's mind raced. She had already suspected that Ghost was more than just a wild creature. His strength, his intelligence, it all pointed to something unnatural. But to hear it from this stranger's lips made it all the more real. Ghost wasn't just a wounded wolf. He was something much bigger, something the galaxy feared. "I don't care what he was created for," Area replied, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. "He's not your weapon. He's my friend." The leader's eyes narrowed beneath his helmet. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said, his tone hard. "We've been tracking him for years. He escaped a military program, one that designed him to kill. You think you can just keep him here, in this wilderness, unprotected?" Area shook her head, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand. Ghost is not a tool. He's not a weapon. He's alive. He chooses his own path." The leader didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced at his team, nodding slightly. They moved, silently, toward the edges of the clearing. Area watched them carefully, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the pressure building, the imminent danger that was closing in. They were going to try to take Ghost. Without warning, the leader raised his hand, signaling his team to stop. He turned back to Area. "If you truly believe that," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "then you're more foolish than I thought." Then he did something Area didn't expect. He reached up and removed his helmet. Beneath it was a face that was both human and something more. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were an unnatural shade of yellow. His features were sharp, too sharp to be completely human. And when he spoke again, his voice held a power she couldn't ignore. "I am the Alpha," he said, his gaze fixed on Area. "And I've come to collect what is mine." Area's blood ran cold. The words Alpha struck a deep chord within her. Ghost's growls intensified as he bared his teeth, stepping forward to stand between her and the leader. The way the wolf moved was unlike anything she had ever seen before. He wasn't just protecting her. He was challenging the Alpha. "No," Area said, stepping forward as well, her voice steady. "He's not yours. He's no one's." The Alpha's expression darkened, his eyes flicking between her and Ghost. The tension between them was palpable, the air charged with a strange energy. She felt it in her bones. This was a battle that neither side could walk away from easily. The leader took a step back, giving a brief, dismissive laugh. "You think you can stop me?" he asked. "You, a human girl, think you can challenge the alpha of the hunt? You've made a grave mistake." Arya felt a sudden, burning desire to protect Ghost at all costs. There was no way she was going to let this stranger take him, no matter what he claimed. The bond they shared was stronger than anything she had ever felt before. Ghost had saved her once, and now it was her turn to save him. Without another word, the Alpha raised his arm, signaling to his team. The warriors advanced, moving swiftly and silently. Arya's heart raced, and in that moment, she knew the fight was inevitable. She looked at Ghost, who was already preparing for battle. His body was low to the ground, his eyes locked on the approaching enemies. "Ghost," Arya whispered, "we have to fight." The wolf's blue eyes flicked to her, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow. It was as if he understood her completely. Then, with a powerful growl, he launched himself at the first warrior, knocking him to the ground with a force that made the ground tremble. The warrior's armor dented as Ghost tore into him with incredible speed and strength. Arya's heart pounded as she watched the chaos unfold. Ghost was a blur of white fur and muscle, moving faster than she could keep up with. He was more than just a wolf. He was a force of nature, a creature that had been born to dominate. The Alpha stood still, watching with a mixture of anger and amusement. "This won't last," he said, his voice cold. "The pack always wins." But Arya wasn't ready to lose. She knew she couldn't let Ghost fight alone. She reached for the small weapon she carried, a stun gun designed to disable creatures. She had never used it before, but now seemed as good a time as any. With a deep breath, Arya aimed the stun gun at one of the advancing warriors. Her hands were steady as she pulled the trigger. The weapon fired, hitting the soldier square in the chest. The warrior collapsed to the ground, twitching as the electrical current took hold. Ghost didn't pause to look at her. He continued his attack, each strike bringing him closer to the Alpha. Arya's heart raced as she fired again, taking down another warrior. There were only a few left now, but the real challenge was still to come. The Alpha watched the battle unfold with interest, his yellow eyes narrowing. "You are strong, human," he said, "but you cannot stop what has already begun." The battle raged on. Ghost was a blur of motion, leaping and striking with the force of a storm, his powerful limbs slamming into the warriors with shocking precision. The sound of armored bodies hitting the dirt echoed across the wasteland, followed by the low growls and barks of the albino wolf. Arya's heart raced as she watched, her hands still gripping the stun gun tightly. Ghost was fast, almost too fast for her to keep up with, moving as if the world around him didn't exist. The warriors had underestimated him. They hadn't expected a creature like Ghost to fight back with such ferocity. One by one, they fell, their armor dented and their bodies thrown to the ground. But even as Ghost took down the last of the team, the Alpha remained calm, watching from the edge of the clearing. "You're strong, human," the Alpha said, his voice low and smooth, his yellow eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scene. "But your fight is futile. You cannot." Arya's breath was heavy, but she didn't back down. Ghost was still standing, his fur bloodied and his eyes wild, but his stance was firm, unyielding. Arya could see the pain in his eyes as well. The wounds he had endured had not healed completely, but he was alive, and he was fighting, and that was enough for her. The Alpha took a step forward, his presence imposing. "The pack is stronger than any single wolf," he said, his voice cold. "Ghost cannot fight the entire pack. He was never meant to be free." The words stung, but Arya stood her ground, her hand still on the stun gun. "I won't let you take him. He's not a weapon. He's not yours to command." The Alpha's lips curled into a thin smile. "You still don't understand, do you? Ghost is not a simple animal. He was created to serve a purpose, one that you cannot stop. He glanced at the fallen warriors, their bodies still twitching from the stun blasts. And now, the real challenge begins. Arya's heart skipped a beat as she realized what the Alpha meant. He wasn't talking about just him. He was talking about something much bigger. The sound of howling echoed across the plain, sharp and bone-chilling. It wasn't just one wolf. It was a whole pack. The wind picked up, carrying the howls to Arya's ears, and her blood ran cold. Ghost's ears flattened against his head as he turned toward the sound. His eyes were filled with something dark, something primal. He knew what was coming. He knew the danger they were about to face. Arya's stomach tightened as she looked back at the Alpha. "You've called them, haven't you?" she said, her voice trembling. "The pack. You've brought them here." The Alpha's smile widened. "They were always coming. You cannot hide from the pack. You cannot stop what was set into motion long before you met Ghost." Arya's gaze shifted to Ghost. He was tense, his body still bristling with energy. She could see the fear in his eyes now, not for himself, but for her. He had fought to protect her, but now there were too many of them. Too many for just the two of them to defeat. "We need to go," Arya said urgently, her mind racing. "We need to leave before they get here." But Ghost didn't move. His eyes were locked on the horizon, his body tensed like a coiled spring. He wasn't going to run. Not now. Not when he had already fought so hard. "I won't leave you," Arya said, her voice fierce as she stepped closer to him, standing beside the wolf. "We'll face this together." The Alpha laughed softly, the sound echoing across the battlefield. "How noble, but the pack is coming, and you cannot stop them. You cannot win." Arya took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She knew the situation was dire, but she also knew one thing. She wasn't going to give up on Ghost. Not now. Not ever. Then the pack arrived. At first, it was just one. A massive white wolf, larger than Ghost, with glowing eyes that burned like fire. It stepped out from behind a rocky outcrop, its powerful limbs moving with fluid grace. It was followed by others, dozens of them, all larger than any creature Arya had ever seen, each one more terrifying than the last. Their eyes were all the same, cold, unblinking, filled with the same predatory hunger. Arya's heart raced as she realized just how much trouble they were in. There were too many of them. The pack was stronger than anything they had faced before, and yet Ghost stood tall, his head raised high, his posture defiant. The leader of the pack, the largest of them all, stepped forward, his fur gleaming like the moon, his eyes cold and calculating. He locked eyes with Ghost, then turned to Arya. "You've made a mistake, human," the Alpha of the pack said, his voice a deep growl. "You've chosen to stand with the traitor." Arya stood tall beside Ghost, trying not to let the fear show. She knew she had no chance of defeating them all, but she wasn't going to give up. Not without a fight. "We'll never be your slaves," Arya said, her voice steady, though her hands shook. "We'll never be yours to command." The pack Alpha's eyes narrowed. "Then you will die with him." Ghost growled low in his throat, his body brimming with power. He wasn't going to back down. And neither was she. The standoff was unbearable. Ghost, the once wounded albino wolf, stood tall beside Arya, his fur bristling with energy, his eyes locked onto the pack leader's every movement. The Alpha of the pack was larger than Ghost, with glowing eyes that gleamed like twin stars, and the other wolves stood behind him, silently waiting, their hunger palpable. Arya felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. There was no escape, no way out of this. She was outnumbered, outmatched, and yet she couldn't bring herself to back down. Ghost had chosen to protect her, and she would do the same for him, no matter what. The Alpha of the pack stepped forward, his eyes narrowed as he watched Arya. "You don't understand, human," he said in a low, menacing growl. "This creature," he motioned to Ghost, "was born for a purpose. He was made to serve, to obey. And now you've turned him into something weak. He is a traitor to the pack, and you've chosen to stand with him." Arya clenched her fists. Her voice was steady, but she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "He's not your property," she said firmly. "Ghost is his own wolf, and he's not a traitor. He's a survivor." The pack alpha's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of cruel amusement. "Survivor, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think this animal can truly survive without the pack, without the strength of his own kind? He is nothing but a weapon. And weapons have a purpose. Once that purpose is gone, they become useless. And then they die." Arya's heart pounded, but she didn't let the words shake her. "No, you're wrong," she said. "Ghost isn't just a weapon. He's more than that. He's not a tool to be used and discarded." The pack alpha took another step forward, his eyes glowing brighter now. "You're naive, human. The pack is everything. Strength in numbers. Without us, Ghost is nothing. He will be hunted down, and you will be left to die with him." The words stung, but Arya refused to let them break her. She had seen Ghost fight for her, seen the connection they shared. He wasn't just some beast to be controlled. He was her friend, and she would never abandon him, no matter how much the pack tried to intimidate her. "You think I care about your pack," she said, her voice fierce. "I don't care about your pack. What I care about is Ghost, and I'm not leaving him. We'll fight if we have to." The alpha's eyes flashed with anger. "You are a fool," he spat. "You will never win. The pack will tear you apart." Before Arya could respond, there was a sudden movement from behind the alpha. The wolves stirred, and Arya felt a shiver of fear run down her spine. She glanced at Ghost, who stood poised and ready, his muscles taut, his eyes locked on the alpha. But it was clear that the pack was growing impatient. The leader of the pack, sensing the shift in the air, raised his head high and let out a long, chilling howl. The wolves responded, their voices blending together in a deep, unsettling chorus. It was the signal. The hunt was about to begin. But before Arya could react, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Stop." All eyes turned to the source of the voice, another figure emerging from the shadows. Arya's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the new arrival. The figure was tall, and unlike the pack members, he wasn't wearing armor. His clothes were simple but practical. His face was human, but there was something different about him, something that made him stand out even among the wolves. "Who are you?" the alpha demanded, his voice low with suspicion. The newcomer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked forward, his eyes scanning the scene, taking in the pack and the confrontation unfolding before him. Finally, he spoke, his tone calm but with a sense of authority. "I'm not here to fight," he said, "but if you want to avoid a real battle, you need to listen." The alpha growled, stepping closer to the man. "You dare tell me what to do?" he snarled. The man didn't flinch. "I dare," he said simply. Arya's eyes widened in surprise. Who was this man? And what was he doing here? The man's gaze flicked to Arya and Ghost. "You've made a mistake, Alpha," he said. "This wolf, Ghost, was never meant to be a tool. He was meant to be free." The pack leader's expression twisted with anger. "You're a fool, just like this human," he sneered. "You think you can change what has been set in motion." The man's eyes darkened. "It's not about changing the past," he said. "It's about understanding what's at stake. The pack doesn't need to kill Ghost. He's more valuable alive than dead." Arya's heart raced as she watched the interaction unfold. The man spoke with a level of confidence that sent a wave of relief through her. She didn't know who he was, but he was standing between her and the Alpha now, and that was all that mattered. The Alpha was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting between the man and Arya. Then, with a growl, he turned away. "We'll see about that," he said darkly. "The pack will have what it wants." And with that, he led his pack away, disappearing into the shadows of the wasteland. Arya stood frozen, her breath still shaky from the tension, but she felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time since this fight had begun, she felt like there might be a way out, but she knew the battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. "Are you okay?" the man asked, turning toward her. Arya nodded slowly, still in shock. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man smiled faintly. "I'm someone who knows what happens when a pack gets too comfortable with its power. I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen again." The silence that followed the Alpha's retreat was thick, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Arya stood in the center of the clearing, still in disbelief. Ghost was by her side, his fur matted with blood but his stance proud and alert. The pack had left, but they weren't gone for good. Arya knew that the threat still loomed over them. The Alpha had promised this wasn't over. The man who had appeared in the midst of the confrontation was now standing a few feet away from her, his calm demeanor and steady gaze offering a strange sense of reassurance. He didn't look like anyone Arya had ever met before. There was something about him, a quiet authority that seemed to radiate from him naturally. His eyes were dark, and his features sharp, but there was no malice in his gaze, only a quiet understanding. "So, who are you?" Arya finally asked, her voice still a little shaky from the encounter. She couldn't help but feel grateful for his sudden appearance. Without him, the Alpha and his pack might have overwhelmed them. The man tilted his head slightly. "My name is Ryan. I'm someone who has seen the consequences of leaving creatures like Ghost to the will of the pack, and I've spent my life working to stop it." Arya frowned, trying to understand. "You're with them?" she asked, motioning to the retreating pack. Ryan shook his head. "No, I'm not with them. I'm here to make sure no one else gets lost in that system. The pack you just saw, Ghost's old pack, is more than just a group of wolves. They were part of a military project, part of a long-standing experiment to create weapons, to make creatures like Ghost into soldiers. But Ghost wasn't meant to be one of them. He was never meant to be a tool." Arya looked at Ghost, who was now walking beside her, his movements slower but still filled with strength. But why didn't they just leave him alone? Why are they after him? Ryan's expression softened, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. Because Ghost was a failure to them. They saw him as a defective weapon. He rejected their training, their commands. He didn't follow orders, didn't kill when they told him to. So they marked him as a threat to their control. And now they're hunting him down, hunting both of you down. Arya felt her chest tighten. "What do we do now?" she asked. The fear that had started to settle in her chest now began to grow, like a heavy weight. The Alpha had promised to return, and the pack's size alone was overwhelming. Ryan stepped closer, his voice steady. "Now we fight for him. And for you. There's no more running. You and Ghost are both a part of something much bigger than you realize. The wolves, the pack, the Alpha, they've been controlling too many things for too long. But it doesn't have to be that way. Ghost and you have the power to change it. Together." Arya looked at Ghost, who turned his head toward her, his blue eyes meeting hers. There was a silent understanding between them, something that went deeper than words. She had always known Ghost was special, but now, hearing Ryan's words, it all clicked into place. Ghost wasn't just a survivor. He was a key, a part of a bigger plan that could change the galaxy. And somehow, she was a part of that plan too. "I don't want to run anymore," Arya said, her voice steady now. "I won't leave him. We'll fight." Ryan nodded, his eyes flicking to the horizon, where the Alpha and his pack had disappeared. "That's the right choice. But you need to understand, this won't be easy. The pack is relentless. They'll come at you with everything they have. You won't just be fighting them. You'll be fighting the system that created them, the forces that have controlled creatures like Ghost for years. It's not just about survival anymore. It's about standing up for what's right." Arya took a deep breath. She had no idea what's he was stepping into, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let Ghost face this battle alone. They had come this far, and they had survived together. There was no turning back now. Ryan seemed to sense her resolve. "I can help," he said, "but you'll need more than just me. Ghost will need more allies. The pack may be strong, but they're not invincible. If you want to fight back, you'll need to find others who've been through what you've experienced. Others who are willing to stand with you." "I can't do this alone," Arya said, her voice quiet but determined. "I know that now. But what do we do next?" Ryan smiled, a rare expression that softened his sharp features. "Next, we get to work. You'll need weapons. You'll need allies. And most importantly, you'll need to understand that the fight you're about to face is bigger than you think. This isn't just about Ghost anymore. It's about freedom. It's about the future." Arya nodded. The path ahead was uncertain, but she wasn't afraid anymore. The pack had come for Ghost once, and now they would come for all of them. But she would be ready. With Ghost at her side and Ryan guiding them, they would take a stand. They would fight for their future, no matter what it cost. As she looked at Ghost again, she saw the trust in his eyes, the bond they shared. They had faced death together, and now they would face the pack, and they would win. The days following their decision to fight felt like an eternity to Arya. She and Ghost traveled deeper into the wilderness, away from the colony, where they could plan and prepare. Ryan had led them to an old, abandoned facility, a place hidden beneath layers of rock and dust. It was here, away from the watchful eyes of the pack, that they could train, gather resources, and form a plan. Arya's mind had not stopped racing since the pack's retreat. The Alpha's words haunted her. He had made it clear that they would come for Ghost again, and next time, they would not leave until they had him, or worse, or two. But something had changed in Arya. The fear that had once gripped her now seemed small, insignificant. She had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. The bond between her and Ghost had only grown stronger with each passing day. She had never expected that caring for a creature like him, this massive, deadly wolf, could bring her this sense of purpose. She didn't just see him as a beast, she saw him as her equal. And now she was willing to fight for him, no matter what the cost. "Are you ready?" Ryan asked, interrupting her thoughts. He was standing by a table covered with maps and old technology, his expression serious but encouraging. Ghost was resting nearby, watching both of them with alert eyes, his body tense, ready for action. Arya nodded, feeling a mix of determination and nerves. "I'm ready. We need to stop them before they come for us again." Ryan smiled, his eyes softening. "Good. But remember, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting to stop what's been happening for years. You and Ghost aren't just survivors. You're the key to changing things. The pack, the Alpha, they've been controlling creatures like Ghost for far too long. But now, it's time for that to end." Arya glanced at Ghost, who was standing up, his eyes locked onto hers. There was a silent understanding between them. He wasn't just a wolf. He was a force, a symbol of resistance, and together, they would be the change that was needed. "How do we stop them?" Arya asked, her voice steady now. She was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Ryan had given her a glimpse of the bigger picture, but now she needed to know how they would face the pack head-on. Ryan moved to the table and spread out a series of maps. The Alpha's pack isn't just a group of wolves. They're part of a larger network, one that's been controlling and manipulating creatures like Ghost for years. We have to strike at the heart of this operation. The Alpha is just a part of a much bigger plan. Arya leaned over the table, studying the maps. They showed areas of interest, old military bases, hidden labs, and other locations that Arya didn't recognize. The more she looked at them, the more she realized how deep this went. The pack isn't just about hunting Ghost. They're part of something more dangerous, she said quietly, piecing it all together. Ryan nodded. Exactly. The Alpha is one of many, but we don't need to take down all of them. Not yet. We need to start by targeting their resources, their command structure. Once we do that, the rest of the pack will fall apart. Ghost, and you will be the catalyst. Together, you can inspire others. Creatures like Ghost who've been controlled for so long. Aria's mind raced. She had never imagined anything like this. She had thought the problem was simple. Fight the wolves, protect Ghost, and survive. But now, it was bigger than that. It was about freeing others, stopping an entire system of control. "What's the first step?" she asked, her voice firm. Ryan pointed to one of the locations on the map. "We start by attacking this facility. It's where they've been keeping the most dangerous creatures. If we can shut it down, we'll cripple their operations. It'll send a message." Aria glanced at Ghost. He stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the map. He could sense what was at stake, just as she did. He was ready to fight, and so was she. "Let's do it," she said, her voice strong. "Let's take them down." The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. Aria and Ryan worked together to gather supplies, and Ghost trained, his movements fluid and precise. Ryan taught Aria how to use new weapons, and Ghost helped her sharpen her instincts. Together, they formed a bond that went beyond anything Aria had ever expected. She was no longer just a human girl trying to survive. She was part of a team that could change the fate of the galaxy. The day of the attack arrived sooner than Aria expected. They had spent hours studying the facility's layout, planning their movements carefully. The wolves had no idea they were coming. They were too focused on Ghost, too focused on their own hunger for control. As they approached the facility, Aria's heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't just walking into danger. She was walking into the future. The future where Ghost and others like him would no longer be tools for others to control, where they would be free. "We're ready," Ryan said, his voice calm but filled with purpose. Aria nodded, her hands steady. "Let's end this." Ghost moved ahead of them, his massive form a blur of white fur against the dark landscape. He was ready, and so was she. Together, they would bring an end to the pack's reign, and they would fight for a future where creatures like Ghost could live on their own terms. As they entered the facility, they knew this would be their biggest challenge yet. But Aria was no longer afraid. With Ghost at her side, she had become something stronger, a force that would fight for freedom, no matter the cost.